Hello. Hi guys, today is the 23rd of May and it is day 64 of lockdown. 60 bloody
Day 64. Blinking heck. Now,
Yeah.
Anyone who was watching the vlog yesterday, day 63, as it were, will know that we had a bit of an exclusive, didn't we, on the vlog? I exclusively broke quite a big news story to Ellie, who hadn't yet seen
no
it.
idea.
Having read all about it on Facebook, I exclusively broke that then to you, didn't I?
Yep, you did get the exclusive to me.
I think it would be fair to say as well that since we recorded that vlog, people in the media and all over social media have talked about little else.
Yeah.
Are those two things connected? Who can say? Who can say? But we're here again today with the news that matters.
Yep.
We are talking more about Dominic Cummings, who has allegedly broken the rule. Well, he's broken the rules, and I don't know why I even put allegedly.
Yeah, there's no allegedly. He's admitted it.
He's broken the rule. He's admitted it. Well, but
he's admitted it to an extent.
He's admitted doing the things he's accused of doing.
But he claims they're within the rules.
There's arguments and nuance, and also there's kind of conflict between his account of events and his partner's account of the same events, who was reporting about it in The Spectator.
Yep.
So, you know,
there's a lot to dissect, really, isn't there? But let's start with the facts of the story. So, a while back now, when old Boris was diagnosed with COVID, old Dominic was showing symptoms, I believe, has suspected COVID and was told to self-isolate, and his wife had symptoms, so it was believed that they had COVID. So as per the rules at the time, it is you and anybody else in your household have to self-isolate for 14 days. 7 days for those who actually have the symptoms and 14 days for anybody else to allow for an incubation period in case they haven't shown symptoms yet. So off he trotted, off to home to self-isolate. And that, as far as the rest of us were aware, was what happened. But yesterday, working, as we mentioned, the Guardian and the Mirror working together broke the story that they had, in fact, a few days after being told to self-isolate, drove 254 miles to Durham to stay with Dominic Cummings' parents, who are in their 70s. And they did so allegedly, well, their reasoning was that Mary, his wife, was sick and he was afraid he was going to get sicker and wasn't going to have sufficient childcare for their 4-year-old son. So the only possible option was to go to Durham
from London.
So that there would be a babysitter on hand if they needed one, but until they needed one, they would self-isolate in their own little part of his parents' house. And they didn't mix with anyone, and their shopping was dropped at the door, but they wanted to be near a family in case Dominic succumbed and needed extra assistance with the old Babbins. That's his story. That's what they're saying happened. Mary Wakefield, who is his wife, who is also a writer for The Spectator, interestingly, as you said, wrote a story having had coronavirus about their time with coronavirus, what the actual symptoms were, how it felt like, etc., and their time self-isolating from their London home. Interestingly, and I don't know if you know this tidbit, also, and I don't know how fact-checked this has been in circulation on a lot of the stuff that people have been commenting, but obviously I don't have the source because this would have been within the Cummings house. But he apparently did get very ill with it and collapsed, but didn't go to hospital because of the optics of what it would look like, the fact that he was in Durham, apparently. But that may or may not be true. What appears to be true but is being conflicted is that the police went to the Cummings household while he was there to advise them on the lockdown restrictions, basically to sort of say that this isn't allowed, but now that you're here, you're going to have to isolate here.
Yes, so the police have issued a statement saying that happened.
Yes, they've said, they've gone to this address. They did say originally that they didn't actually speak to Dominic Cummings, but they spoke to a person at that address. Dominic was allegedly self-isolating, so they spoke to somebody else, probably one of the parents, I would assume, and advised them what the rules were. Basically said that this was against advice, but now that they were here, they had to self-isolate because you can't be in the populace, basically. Now, that whole thing is the biggest pile of horse shit I think I've heard in a long time. For many, many reasons. Their argument, and from Dominic's perspective, he has said that he behaved reasonably and legally, which is bullshit. The advice to everybody was don't take any unnecessary travel, and if you are self-isolating, if you show symptoms, immediately self-isolate at home, as everybody else in your household must do. Do not travel. You can't even go out for exercise. You can't do anything. You gotta stay the fuck home. Now, there was talk back before this kicked off specifically about Dominic Cummings, which was sort of asked as one of the questions in one of the daily press briefings. What do you do if you have a child and you're too sick to take care of it? At that point, the advice was, obviously, if the welfare of another person is endangered, then you can reach out to friends or family to assist. The assumption would be that you'd go with local friends and family. All of Mary Wakefield's family, by the way, well, several members of her family live in London. So you sort of think maybe they could have helped out, and also maybe they could have waited until it was necessary. If Dominic Cummings wasn't feeling too bad, but he was just doing this in case he got more ill, I think knowing you've got a positive COVID-19 test result, getting in a car and travelling up to Durham, which at the time had quite low infection rates.
Yeah, taking your confirmed case of COVID-19 to a different part of the country. To a
household belonging to your parents who are in the high-risk group because of their age, regardless of whether you're going to stay in your own room in the house, which I also suspect is bullshit. Now, this all happened and this came out, and Dominic has defended it, and quite a lot of very prominent MPs have all come out in defence of the actions with quite similarly worded tweets, which suggests that the whip has said you're going to have to show public support for him. Boris has been suspiciously absent, but that's not really suspicious or surprising anymore, is it? He just doesn't bother fucking showing up. And it's his best buddy, and he doesn't want to have his fingerprints anywhere near any of this. So essentially, and surprisingly, considering several other quite prominent people have been forced to immediately resign when they've broken lockdown rules, and you'd have to say to a lesser degree, because the two significant ones I mean are Neil Ferguson, who was the professor who sort of advocated lockdown, who had his girlfriend come visit him a couple of times, and the Scottish health minister who went to her second home. So she went on a visit. I think it was a 40-minute journey. She shouldn't have been doing it. She went twice. She had to immediately resign as well. Neither of those guys had COVID-19, whereas Dominic Cummings was confirmed to have the virus and be with people who were symptomatic. If he'd been under the test, track, trace programme, he had been working closely with Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson had a confirmed COVID test, so everybody who'd been around him would have been told to self-isolate immediately for 14 days, regardless. Fuck that, ignored that entirely. I've slightly lost my thread there, sorry. But yeah, basically, he flouted the rules. None of that is essential travel. Anyway, but that's the argument that they're going with, that it was for the welfare of the child, and all of the sort of Tories, include like Gove, Raab, Rishi Sunak, I thought better of you, and a few others have all come out saying he's doing what any parent would have done, sort of lots of very emotive, he was looking after his child, looking after your wife and child is not a crime, etc, etc. So, let's say that we go with that. For a minute.
Okay.
Let's say, okay, seems a bit dodgy to me. Seems like maybe there should have been somebody a bit more local that could have helped out, or they could have waited. He's quite rich. I dare say they probably could have sorted out some childcare locally.
Well, also, I've seen some guidelines shared around today that indicate what you should do if you don't have family to hand to help,
Yeah, what's that? What's the advice?
It was basically something along the lines of contact the council, and there are support
Contact social
hubs,
services,
and there are people who can
the key
do
workers
these
hubs
things,
and
because
things.
there are people who don't have family, and the advice in that situation is not drive to Durham. It's seek out the local support hubs that are in place, those support networks to look after your kids, because that, again, it's for the safety of everyone, isn't it?
For the safety of everybody, and at least it's limiting the number of people who have exposure, keeping it all to sort of small hubs of key workers' children, etc., etc. So let's forget that all of that is already a huge steaming pile of horse shit. Interestingly, while he was up there, happened to coincide with his mother's 71st birthday, and there's witnesses suggesting that there was a garden party and he was seen in the garden playing with his son, dancing along to ABBA on his mother's 71st birthday. So seems like it probably wasn't about, he wasn't self-isolating while he was up there, and it wasn't really about the fact that he was ill, because he seemed fine. So there's conflicting arguments as to whether or not he was actually even ill. If he was, shouldn't have been up with his parents. If he wasn't, shouldn't have been up with his parents, basically. So this is the story that hit the news today, and they all come out defending him.
Some pretty piss-weak excuses as well.
Oh, so weak. So it doesn't hold water, and like you can see it in their eyes. Like, because they can't really defend it, because it is so contradictory to the advice that everybody else has been following.
All the people defending him, none of them believe what they're saying, but they're saying it publicly in the press. It's
I know, honestly, well, somebody tweeted, so essentially what's happened here, because they tweeted showing all of the very similar tweets along the same line, the party line being, it was understandable, it was in the best interest of his family, you would have done the same, common sense, blah, 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 all of that, same party line. This tweet basically suggested, so what's happened there is the whip has told all Tory MPs to tweet showing their support, and all of the ones that he doesn't have any dirt on have gone, no, go fuck yourself. And all of the ones that he does have something over have gone, fuck. All right, and then they've said stuff. Boris suspiciously quiet, probably under the advice of Dominic Cummings, I would have thought. Well, but I'm loving this, because there was a little bit of a stroke of genius by The Guardian and The Mirror. They leaked this story, well, they went with this story, they released the story, and let a good day occur of sort of about 24 hours of all the, sort of what's going on, let the press briefing happen and all of that. And let a bunch of Tories come forward and defend his actions and justify his actions, etc., etc. And then they lay in wait and just went, oh, by the way, he did it again. He did it again. He was photographed back in London, having recovered, having done his self-isolation, and about 4 or 5 days later was photographed in a town 30 miles away from his parents' house, back up in the Durham sort of neck of the woods.
So he went back to London in between.
Went back to London, and then went back up to Durham. Well,
it must be for more essential childcare, was it?
Must be.
Must be more essential childcare.
Yeah, he was seen walking along the River Tees. And so it was recognised by a member of the public he was with a wife and child of about the right age, and apparently commented on how lovely the bluebells were looking, and the guy was a retired chemistry teacher, I believe, and was just like, I'm sure he's supposed to be in London.
I'm sure the bluebells were fantastic this year, but not worth breaking lockdown for.
No. So, and I like that they waited on that story, because if they'd gone with both, first of all, they could have... I can't really see, because actually the excuses they've come up with are shit.
Yes.
But they came up with them, and now they're going to have to contradict them again, because he wasn't self-isolating, he was out and about. He wasn't even at his parents' home, who he'd already exposed himself to. He was a 30-minute drive, 30 miles away from their home. So he'd obviously gone up to visit his parents for the weekend again, and then gone for a walk with his wife and kid for his daily bit of exercise, ignoring the fact that he was 250 fucking miles away from where he lives. At that point, you weren't allowed to drive for exercise before anybody gets on that. That's a new rule that only came in last week. This was back in early April.
You certainly shouldn't be driving to Durham for exercise.
No.
It feels, I mean, I'm no geographer.
No.
But it feels to me that if you live in London, and you're forced to get in your car. Even now, the lockdown rules have been a little bit relaxed.
Yeah.
If you're driving out of London, you probably won't get as far as Durham before you find somewhere suitable to do a bit of exercise.
Yeah, there are some quite nice spots in Greater London for like go to Richmond Park, have a look at the deer.
Parks in London.
Yeah, it is such bullshit. And I don't want to look happy about it, because actually, the thing that I am concerned about, although I am fairly gleeful about the fact that this is fairly unambiguously wrong, and he is in trouble, and even people who are on the right, quite a lot of Tory MPs are sort of like, this is fucking inexcusable, and I'm not putting my face anywhere near that story. So he's in trouble. There's loads of people calling for him to resign. At the moment, the word from Downing Street is, no, he didn't do anything wrong, but then this second part of the story has leaked, which I don't really see how they're going to defend. So I'm fairly gleeful that however long he manages to cling on, he's going to be fucked. He's going to have to resign, or possibly, as a means of saving face, Boris might sack him. So that Boris can sort of save a bit of face, because he's been conspicuously quiet, and save his own skin. But at least Dominic fucking puppet master Cummings can be out of the picture for a while with his eugenics-y kind of mentality. So I'm quite gleeful of that. I'm also quite glad that several prominent MPs have backed him, because this doesn't look good for them either. There's been a certain amount of, no amount of shit will stick to these guys, but this is emotive to, like, because also I should say, like, you could just sort of look at it as like, oh well, it's just one guy breaking some rules, but the fact that lots of people have defended it basically is telling the public that it's okay to have done this, when there are lots and lots of people, most people I would say, other than the lunatic fringe who've just been flouting lockdown because they're dickheads, I think most people have made at least some sacrifices. They've gone without seeing people they love. There's plenty of children out there who haven't seen their grandparents for 8 or 9 weeks. There are people who've not been able to attend funerals of loved ones because it would have meant travelling too far. There are people who have died alone in hospital because people haven't been allowed to travel. And they, whichever side of the fence they are on politically, will be fucking baying for blood.
Yeah, well,
You'd have to think.
I'm sure your Facebook has been the same as mine today, and a lot of people's social medias. My Facebook has been just absolutely full with people who are furious and fuming, so listing all the sacrifices they've made, like you say, like missing funerals and birthdays, and not seeing their loved ones, not seeing their kids sometimes, or some people are separated from their partners, their parents, loved ones, elderly relatives who they don't know how much time they have with them, and they've all been separated. They've all been making sacrifices.
Yeah, like just my personal experience. Didn't get to do Mother's Day with my gran and mum.
No, Boris Johnson did Mother's Day with his mum, though, didn't he?
My gran's 97th birthday. Couldn't see her for that. There's lots of those sorts of things going on. That's just like. So
this is quite an emotive subject
galling,
for people,
isn't it?
And hopefully, as galling as it is, and it sucks that people are upset, but hopefully this will kind of actually hit them emotionally in a way that makes them actually, I don't know, react or respond.
Personally affected and angry.
They've a lot of things where people have kept on just going, oh well, they've been doing a good job or whatever, and you think, well, you can't have it both ways. Either this was fine, in which case, well, it should have been fine for everyone to do stuff, or it's not fine at all. And I mean, some of the defences have been so feeble, but I literally
they've been
I saw someone today.
Ridiculous nonsense.
I read,
and you can see it, like if it's one of the televised ones, you can just see them going,
I read something today with a Tory MP saying, well, these rules are like they're open. These lockdown measures are guidelines. You know, they're open to interpretation. And it reminds me of when I was working in a call centre, and I was and people used to read magazines and things between their calls, and I decided one day I was going to read a novel that I was into, and I was reading that between my calls, and my supervisor came around and he said, "Oh, Chris, are you sure you're going to be able to concentrate on your calls if you're reading, you know, something quite heavy like that in between?" And I was like, "Yeah, no, it's fine. I've got this." He went, "All right, well, I'll leave it for you to decide."
Right.
And he went away, and I did decide, and I carried on reading my book. And then, about 45 minutes later, he came back, and he snapped my book shut, and he opened my desk drawer and put the book in there and slammed it shut. And I said, well, I thought you said you were going to leave it for me to decide. And he said,
You
yeah,
decided wrong.
I thought you were going to decide not to read it. And it reminds me of that, because they're sort of going, well, now they're suddenly saying, well, these are guidelines, they're open to interpretation. And you go, oh, okay, but if my interpretation of these guidelines is wrong, the police can impose a fine.
Yeah.
So that doesn't feel quite
as flexible. It's not really a guideline, is it, if it's finable if you do the contrary?
Except that, of course, they've not fined Dominic Cummings, and he's not so far been in any trouble, and it's just indefensible.
Yeah, it is, and there's two sides of it, because the one side that I'm sort of optimistic about is that, hopefully, this will have suitably enraged enough people on both sides of the fence for this to not be tolerated and for him to be out of the picture, because I do genuinely think he's more of the mastermind behind most of Boris Johnson's ideas and plans, and I think he genuinely is a dangerous man.
Well,
so if we can get rid of him, great. The other side of the coin, though, is that this has sent a very strong message to a lot of people who are already very fatigued with lockdown for whatever reason, either for selfish reasons, they just want to go out and have fun, or for very noble reasons, like they miss their family, or they're desperate for childcare, or they whatever, like, that they're going to see this as, well, you've said it's okay for him to do it, so I'm going to do it. I'm going to get in my car, I'm going to drive to my relatives who are over 70 in another part of the country, and I'm going to spend time with them, even though that's against all of the rules. We shouldn't be mixing households. That's one of the main rules, which hasn't changed at any point.
And the crazy thing is, like, ultimately, it shouldn't come down to rules, because it just isn't safe. So we should be doing all this stuff, not because the rules and because we're told to, but because it's not safe to kind of do this stuff, but people are going to interpret it as, well, it's fine for me to do this now. If it's all right for him, it's all right for me. Doing it, and it's so galling, because it just betrays his true character, which is, those rules don't apply to me. I can do what I want. I'm Dominic fucking Cummings. And we've seen
I've got enough shit on enough people that they can't do anything about it. But this is too public, and it's too clearly flouting the rules, and I'm hoping there's enough people that he doesn't have in his pocket that are going to have... Basically, I think this really will come down to, it's Cummings or Johnson. Johnson can't publicly back him, and he can't really keep his job. So if Boris does back him, I think that will turn the tide against Boris, finally. And... basically, I can't see Dominic Cummings coming out of this. So the only thing Boris can do to sort of save his own skin is to fire Cummings. Well, I don't think that'll happen immediately. I hope it happens quite quickly. But actually, the longer it sort of drags on, the more skeletons are coming out of the closet, and actually the more of a fucking disaster this is for the Tory cabinet. So if they want to drag their feet and let more stories come out and make it even worse for themselves, because they're digging their own grave here. This is an absolute shit show. And yeah, it is only one guy doing something, but this guy is the senior advisor to the Prime Minister. This guy is powerful, and this guy has been sort of integral to so much of the goings on and the decisions that have been made in all of this.
This guy, who's never been voted in by any of us at any point ever, has real power in the Tory government, influence on policy. One of the big things that he's credited with is during the Leave campaign, he was the one supposedly responsible for putting the thing on the side of the buses about the 350 million a week for the NHS. And afterwards, he sort of justified that by saying it was necessary to win.
Yeah.
It was a lie. So maybe if that lie was necessary to win, maybe they shouldn't have won. Maybe that result shouldn't stand. Who knows?
David Cameron.
And Boris Johnson has come out as saying he wants to bring countries closer together. So maybe we shouldn't get out of Europe. I don't know.
Well, David Cameron, interestingly, did describe, this was a while back, I think around about the Leave campaign referendum time, but described Dominic Cummings as a career psychopath.
Yeah, well...
And it's a worry when, I don't think a lot of David Cameron, but if David Cameron is saying that you're a psychopath...
Someone employed within his own party, and it's... Well, he's an interesting figure, Dominic Cummings, because up until recently, I didn't know a lot about him. I mean, up until about...
And I think that's by design. I think he liked to be behind the curtain.
I'd say up until about a year ago, I maybe hadn't even heard of him. And then up till recently, I didn't know much about him at all. I've done a little bit of research, and he's quite a divisive figure even within the Conservative Party, and I'm sure there's lots of people who will be happy to see him brought low.
Yes.
But he's been knocking around in and out of the party for a couple of decades now, because in the early 2000s, he was actually the Conservative Party's Director of Strategy.
Yeah, he worked under Ian Duncan Smith.
He did. He quit and then later called Ian Duncan Smith incompetent.
Is that one of those was asked to resign quitting? Which essentially is being sacked, isn't it? But it's just...
I do not know. I just know that officially he resigned his post. Then in 2010, Michael Gove tried to hire him back. I think this was when Michael Gove was Minister for Education. I might be wrong in this, so apologies.
I think that's around about the right era, but I'm not.
So he tried to hire Dominic Cummings to his ministry, and that was blocked by Andy Coulson, who was Director of Communications. So obviously Andy Coulson wasn't keen, but then a year later, Andy Coulson resigned because of the phone hacking scandal from when he was the editor of the News of the World.
Right. So, Director of Communications, hacking people's phones.
Yeah, so that's good. But he's
not
resigned,
a good optic, is it?
So immediately then Michael Gove did bring in Dominic Cummings. Right. Obviously he's a bit of a fan.
Dominic Cummings could well have leaked that story then.
Yeah.
To get his own way. He's a puppet master. Like, obviously, I don't know that.
That's all speculation. What we do know is in 2013 he then resigned and/or was pushed again. We don't know, but he then left to form a free school. Yeah, that was his plan.
And then his next big success was the old Vote Leave
campaign. So
which he did very well at.
He's presumably still tight with Gove, unless at one point Gove or Johnson, one of them stabbed the other in the back, didn't he? So I don't know if
well, they both wanted the PM job, didn't they?
But he was at a time very tight with Gove, who I think you said has come out and supported him today.
I don't think Gove was one of them, actually. I think I misspoke there.
Right.
Raab did, Sunak did, Hancock did, bless him.
As if his word carries any weight.
I know.
Matt Hancock says it so. Well, fine.
Honestly, it's farcical. So, actually, right, I'm looking a little bit too happy about this, and that's only out of sort of, it's all terrible, so I'm taking my jollies where I can find them, because actually this is all potentially very dangerous, and it's going to have ramifications, because you could look at this as, well, this is going to be a very good way of essentially sending a message to the public to flout lockdown, but it not directly coming from the government, so that it's the people's fault when it all goes wrong. So it could still be part of, they want this to sort of spread through the population. When this all first kicked off, I remember thinking, well, when we were first getting data on it, and it was all still quite unknown, and it was coming from other countries mainly before it had really even kicked off here, when it seemed like it was only really, the statistics suggest, and they still do suggest this heavily, that it's the elderly and people with underlying health conditions that seem to be affected by this. Young, fit, healthy people and children, for the most part, seem to be coming out of it relatively unscathed. They might have a bit of a bad time of it, and maybe even a bout of pneumonia, but they seem to be bouncing back better than the at-risk groups. When all of that was starting to come out, alarm bells were ringing with me when they were talking about when he sort of did that this morning chat, Boris Johnson this is now, who said one of the theories is perhaps to let it sort of run through the population, and you'll reach herd immunity much quicker than other countries who take more draconian measures. That was a ringing alarm bells with me, because cynical as it may be, I did think that there are people in the Tory party who are psychopathic enough and sociopathic enough to go, well, a couple of years where basically huge swathes of the elderly and the infirm are bumped off will mean a massive reduction in our welfare costs. That will save a lot of money. And if you don't care about people, that seems like a win-win situation if you're a psychopath. But some of the decisions that have been made along the lines by some of these people do seem to suggest a startling lack of empathy with people, which would suggest that it is that kind of mentality of, well, I'm all right, so I don't give a fuck. And I think they sort of have behaved as such.
What's a career psychopath, Ellie? Is that someone who's like a psychopath at work, but then at the weekends he's lovely?
Oh, he's a lovely dad. Plays catch with his son.
Or is it like...
Goes to his mum's 71st, even if he's going to get in trouble with his boss.
Yeah, that's very sweet.
What a lovely man.
Or is it a reflection of the idea that these days it's hard to kind of have a career and you're kind of more likely to jump around between jobs? But Dominic Cummings is that rare exception. He's managed to become a career psychopath and kind of stuck with it consistently.
Yeah. I don't know. There's a lot of ways you could interpret career psychopath, but I don't think any of them are particularly complimentary.
There's not a flattering way to interpret that, is there? Certainly suggests that he doesn't have a lot of empathy.
No.
Be it for the elderly or the working class, or.
But it's a bit of a worry that he'd go to his mother's. Like, she's 71. Even if she's in really good health, they have sort of said, even if you're in good health, once you're getting above 60, actually, your odds go down quite a bit. But then above 70, they shoot down to being much more likely to becoming really ill and needing hospitalisation with it.
They claim that they stayed in separate buildings.
Yeah.
But if they did stay in separate buildings, why did they need to be there for childcare?
Just in case.
Anyway, so they just stay in separate buildings. On her
it
birthday,
doesn't hold water. It's worse than a colander for holding water. This is just bullshit. It was nothing, because if it was just in case he gets ill, you live in London, you live 2 streets away from a senior aid, your in-laws are around the corner. Do you not have any friends? Maybe not. But
hang on though, Ellie.
Yeah.
Are you telling me that a colander is not good for holding water?
I am telling you that, yes.
All right then. Well then we should wrap this up probably because I've got a mess to clear up in the kitchen.
Okay, right. So we will call that a day there. I dare say we'll probably have some more headlines to dissect tomorrow on the same subject. Although things do seem to move quite fast in this. So this might have all been done and dusted by tomorrow morning. I doubt it though.
You mentioned Matt Hancock. About like half the tests that he.
Oh God, yeah. Jesus, it's not actually half.
Well,
but we'll get to that tomorrow. So
yeah, we'll have all the correct details.
Yeah. So that's it for today, guys. Do remember, like and subscribe, share if you're feeling fruity.
There's no shame in it.
There's no shame in it.